The card was so old the numbers had worn to a suggestion. I set it on the counter at 9:14 a.m. on December 26th, still wearing the coat I'd slept in. The lobby of Hargrove Savings and Trust smelled like carpet cleaner, and the radiator heat made a low ticking sound against the windows. I hadn't eaten. My mouth still tasted like motel room soap. I had $213 in my pocket. I'd counted it twice in the bathroom that morning, flattening each bill against the edge of the sink, smoothing the creases the way you do when you need something to stay precise. My grandfather had pressed that card into my palm 4 years earlier and said, "Keep this, Nora, just keep it," and I had, in the inner zipper pocket of a winter coat I only wore in December, which is the only reason I still had it at all. I had carried it for 4 years without knowing what it was tied to or whether it was tied to anything. There had been plenty of moments I could have used it, moments when I was short or uncertain or just tired of calculating, and I hadn't. He had told me to keep it, and so I had kept it, and now I was standing in a bank lobby on the day after Christmas with nothing else. My name is Nora Callahan. I was 26 years old, and I had been standing outside my parents' house in Delwood, Ohio at 11:30 the previous night with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and one coat. My grandfather, Gerald Callahan, built things. That was the word people used about him. Not that he was kind, though he was, not that he was funny, though he was that too. They said Gerald built things. He had a garage on Cedarfield Road that smelled like motor oil and sawdust all year round, and he spent his Saturdays in it the way other men spent theirs watching football. He rebuilt a 1962 truck from salvage parts over 11 years. He welded a fireproof lockbox in that garage, out of steel plate and piano hinges, and when it was done he painted it gray and put it in the corner of his bedroom closet and told my grandmother it was for important papers. He was my father's father, which meant that when my father was difficult, my grandfather was the part that made sense. He used to take me fishing on the Maumee River when I was small, and he never talked much, but when he did say something it landed cleanly, like a nail driven straight. He died when I was 22. He left no will that the family lawyers could find, only the lockbox, which my father took immediately and put in his own closet without discussion. And a card. He had pressed that card into my hand 3 weeks before he went into the hospital for the last time, and he had looked at me in that direct way of his and said, "Just keep it, Nora. Don't tell your father. Just keep it." I kept it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what bank it was tied to. I assumed it was empty. My parents' house on Weller Drive was a 4-bedroom colonial that my mother described, accurately, as the result of everything we've worked for. My father was a project manager at a mid-size commercial contractor. My mother handled the books for 3 small businesses out of the home office. They were competent, organized people who knew the price of everything and kept very careful track of who owed what. I had moved back in at 23 after a job in Columbus fell through and my lease ended the same week. The understanding, it was never stated directly, was that I would contribute while I got back on my feet. I found work inside of 3 weeks. Bookkeeping part-time then full-time within a month. I paid $600 a month in what my mother called household contribution. I handled the insurance correspondence when my father's policy had the billing error no one could untangle. I reorganized the home office filing system and built the spreadsheet my mother still used to track client invoices. When my parents redid the kitchen the summer I was 24, I spent 4 weekends painting, because the contractor's quote for that phase was $3,200 and my father said it was too much. The work got done. Nobody budgeted for it after the fact. None of this was discussed. It was contributed, absorbed, and redistributed into the ambient category of what the family does. My mother, when she mentioned any of it to her sister on the phone, said we've been getting the house in order, and used the word we in a way that included my father and excluded me entirely. I heard this once. I didn't say anything. I noted it the way you note a small structural thing, a floorboard that gives slightly, not enough to fix, just enough to remember. The house ran on a kind of quiet arithmetic that my parents managed and I participated in without being counted. My father made decisions. My mother tracked outcomes. I was, in their accounting, a temporary variable, present, useful, not a permanent column in any ledger they kept. When I was 25, I tried to talk to my father about a timeline. I asked directly what he thought the arrangement looked like from his end. When was I getting back on my feet enough, by his measure? He said I was doing fine. He said there was no rush. He said, in the particular way he had of closing a subject, we'll figure it out when the time comes. There was no point in his voice where a real answer had been. Just the surface of one. I went back to the room I'd been given and sat at the edge of the desk. The light outside was the flat gray of a November afternoon. I had a client invoice open on the laptop. I closed the tab and sat there for a moment, just sitting, not moving. I understood then that there was no timeline. The arrangement was the timeline. I was useful in the current arrangement, and the current arrangement would continue as long as I did not disrupt it. I had been contributing steadily. The household accounting, the insurance calls, the long weekend afternoons that turned into free labor my father folded into estimates he submitted under his own name. The work was real. It was not, in their view, the kind of work that changed anything. I didn't bring the timeline up again. The disruption came on Christmas Eve. I should have seen it earlier. There were signs. A tightness in the way my mother looked at me when her sister visited, a pause before my name when the neighbors asked who was still living at home. But I missed the shape of it or chose not to see it because I was inside the house and the house felt most days like stability. We were at dinner. My aunt and uncle were there and their son Marcus, who was 28 and had recently bought a condo. My mother had made ham and the good dinner rolls, and there were candles on the table. It was warm in the way holiday dinners are warm, surfaces only, nothing underneath. My uncle made a comment about Marcus's condo, about square footage and appreciation rates. My father said, "Property is the only thing that actually holds value." My mother said, "We've been talking about that, actually." I looked up from my plate. My father set down his fork. "Your mother and I have been doing some planning," he said. "The house. The finances. We've decided it's time to make some structural changes." "What kind of changes?" I asked. "We need the room," my mother said. "Your room. We've decided to convert it. My business has grown enough that I need a proper office space." I said, "You have an office." "A better one," she said. "Nora, you're 26. You've been here long enough. It's time. Tonight." I said. "We didn't want to make a scene," my father said. "It's Christmas Eve," I said. "Which is why," my mother said, "we've been very patient about bringing this up." Something settled behind my sternum. Not the thing I'd been bracing for, not yet, not anything that had a shape, like a room going quiet when someone leaves it. "I need to get my things," I said. My father said, "You can come back for your things. Tonight we have guests." "I need my laptop at minimum," I said. "My work is on that laptop." My mother looked at my aunt. My aunt looked at her plate. "Nora," my father said, "don't make this difficult. You've always been provided for. You've never wanted for anything." "I'm asking to take my laptop," I said. "You can come back Thursday," he said. 2 days. "It won't kill you." "I have work tomorrow," I said. "Then you'll figure it out," he said. "That's what adults do. They figure things out." My uncle cleared his throat. Marcus looked at the candles. My mother said, "You've always been so ungrateful for this family. After everything we've done. I don't know where that comes from, I really don't." I didn't answer. I put my napkin on the table. I stood up. I said, "I'll get my coat." My father said, "You're being dramatic." I said nothing. I got my coat from the hook in the hallway. I heard my uncle say something in a low voice. I heard my father say she'll be fine. I heard the dinner resume, the sound of a fork against ceramic, my aunt asking my mother about the rolls. I stood on the front step. The door closed behind me. The porch light came on automatically. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of Christmas Eve quiet that sits in the air like held breath. A string of lights across the street blinked slowly. My breath made a shape in the cold and then disappeared. I walked to the Brixton Motor Inn on Route 9 because it was the only place I could think of. The desk clerk charged me $74 for one night. I paid cash. The room had 2 beds and a heater that rattled and a window that looked at the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed. I set my phone on the nightstand. I took off my shoes. I lay down in the coat because it was cold and the heater was slow. I looked at the ceiling, which had a water stain in one corner shaped like nothing in particular. I stared at it until it was light. In the morning I brushed my teeth with motel soap and my finger. I counted the money in my coat pocket. I looked at the window and the parking lot and the pale December sky above the Route 9 overpass. I reached into the inner zipper pocket of the coat. My hand found the card. I pulled it out and held it under the bathroom light. It was a debit card, Hargrove Savings Trust, a bank I'd passed 100 times in Delwood without ever walking into. The numbers were worn almost smooth. The name on the card was Gerald R. Callahan. My grandfather had never explained the account. He had only said to keep it. I put on my shoes. I put on my coat. I walked to Hargrove Savings Trust. The lobby was quiet. One teller was at the window, a young woman with a name tag that said Brit. A small artificial tree sat on the counter beside the card reader, decorated with gold ribbon. There were no other customers. The radiator ticked. The ribbon on the little tree moved slightly in the heat from the floor vent. I set the card on the counter. "I'd like to check the balance on this account," I said. Brit looked at the card. She looked at me. She typed something. She stopped typing. She looked at the card again, then at her screen. She moved her chair slightly, a small involuntary adjustment, and looked at the screen again. "Can I see your ID?" she asked. I handed her my driver's license. She typed again. The printer behind her made a sound, then stopped. She looked at the printed page. She set it face down on the counter, which I noticed. "One moment," she said. "I'm going to get my manager." I stood at the counter. The radiator ticked. The small tree's ribbon moved again. A man came out from the back, late 50s, gray at the temples, a navy tie pressed flat. His name tag said R. Harmon, branch manager. He walked with the particular care of someone who has learned to carry information calmly. He looked at the card. He looked at his screen. He looked at me. "Ms. Callahan," he said. "Would you like to sit down?" "I'm fine standing," I said. "I'd like you to sit down," he said. Something shifted in the quality of the air. His voice had a particular weight to it, controlled, deliberate. I sat. He sat across from me and set a printed page on the table between us. Then he reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. He took out a slim sealed envelope, craft paper, brown, with the bank's return address stamped in the corner and a name written in my grandfather's hand across the front. He set it on top of the page. He said, "Your grandfather established this account in 1987. He named you as the sole beneficiary in 2019. The account has been compounding interest for 36 years. He paused. He did not look away from me when he said the next part. "The current balance is $618,400. I looked at the page. The number was printed in the balance column in plain 12-point font. $618,400.17. I looked at it for a moment. I looked at the printed digits. I looked at the date in the upper right corner of the page. The envelope on top of the page had a wax seal on the back, my grandfather's stamp, the one he'd used on formal correspondence since before I was born. I reached forward and lifted the envelope. I turned it over. I broke the seal and folded back the flap and opened it. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. One page, written in the measured, upright script he used for anything important, and beneath the letter, folded in thirds, a county-recorded land deed. I unfolded the deed slowly. The paper was heavier than ordinary paper, the texture of something official and old. At the top it read Cedarfield Road, Delwood, Ohio. The grantee line read Nora and Callahan. He had given me the garage property. The house on Cedarfield Road, the property where the garage stood, a half-acre lot with a detached structure, had been deeded to me in 2019 and recorded with the county. My father had never found this document because it was not in the lockbox. It had been in this envelope, in this bank, waiting. The manager said, "Would you like a moment?" Something went still in my hands, not the weight I'd expected to feel, not its opposite either. Like the moment after you set down something you've been holding for a long time and your arms don't know yet what to do. I looked at the deed. I looked at the balance figure. I said, my grandfather was not a complicated man. He was a man who paid his debts and built what he needed and kept records. I set the deed on the table between us. He kept very good records. I looked at the manager. I'd like to open a new account, I said. In my name only. And I'd like to transfer $4,730 from this account to cover the first and last month on an apartment I saw listed on Cedarfield Road. The manager nodded. I'll also need the contact information, I said, for a property attorney. I have a deed that needs to be reviewed. I picked up the envelope. I folded it once and put it in my coat pocket. Then I sat back in the chair and waited, and the radiator ticked, and outside the window Delwood went on being quiet in the way it always was, indifferent and ordinary and entirely unaware of anything that had just changed. That was 14 months ago. The garage on Cedarfield Road still smells like motor oil and sawdust. I have not changed that. I have changed the windows, replaced 3 panes that had cracked, and I had the electrical inspected and brought up to code because my grandfather would have wanted it done right. The half-acre is mine. I run my bookkeeping clients out of a home office I set up in the corner of the main room, at a desk I built from materials I found in the garage itself, following a set of pencil measurements my grandfather had left on the inside of a cabinet door. The work is steady. I have more clients now than I did when I was paying $600 a month to live in a room that was never mine. My mother had said I was ungrateful. I have thought about that word in the months since more than I expected to. I think what she meant was that I had stopped pretending the arithmetic was fair. That is a different thing from gratitude, and it is not the same as ingratitude. My mother called once, for months after Christmas. She did not apologize. She said the family was concerned and that they hoped I was doing okay and that she wanted me to know the door is always open. I let the call go to voicemail. I listened to it once. I did not call back. My father sent a text in the spring. It said, "Heard you found something of Grandpa's. Hope you're well." I read it. I set the phone face down on the workbench. I went back to what I was doing. My grandfather built things with patience, and he planned further ahead than anyone around him understood. I think about that often. Not as a comfort, exactly, more as a fact I'm still learning to carry, the way you learn to carry a tool you didn't know you needed until the moment you reached for it. The deed lives in the fireproof lockbox now, the one my grandfather welded himself, that my father took and I eventually recovered through the estate attorney. I keep it in the corner of the bedroom closet, exactly where my grandfather kept it. Some evenings I open the closet and see it sitting there, gray and solid and heavier than it looks. I don't open it often. I know what's inside. If any part of this story sits with you, if you've ever contributed without being counted or held something quietly until the moment it mattered, share it with someone who'd understand. You never know who needs to hear it.